about 15 seconds. Oh, it gave me a little bit of a pulse, like maybe it was thinking that I was online. Yeah, I am. Hurrah! So, last week we spent some time modeling some stuff, and we also spent some time setting up our click on people to choose things. We're going to go right back into the click on people to choose things part of things today. So if you're interested in design, you're going to be missing most of this. It's not going to be design based. I'll probably do some 3D modeling at the end, and that is going to be design based, at least for modeling's sake. So when we left off, we had built this. Oh, I better tell people that I'm streaming. Otherwise, we're not going to get anyone visiting. I'm streaming game dev. Gonna program hashtag game dev. No? No hashtag? You're going to just sit there and crash? That was weird. Gonna program dialogue stuff and then model a spaceship. Paste. Alright, so with that in mind, last time what we did is we made it so that we can click on people to talk to them. So here they actually say stuff. They don't get clicked on yet, but we'll make it so you can click on them this time through as well. The basic problem is that we don't have any way to interact with them. So today what we're going to do is we're going to take this button. We're going to make this part of our chat so that our chat ends up having a button if it is a button-based chat. That sounds easy, but you have to think about how you can make your chat contain a button and then have that button do stuff. Like you've got to generate a button and then hook it up right. The two basic options are event-driven or hardwired. Not really sure which way we'll take just yet. Probably event-driven. So let's pop on over to our prefabs chat box. Drop in this chat box here, and then we can drop in this chat box line into the chat box. Oh, you just drop it straight in, that's fine. Shaboom. And it didn't... Oh, because I dropped it in the profile and not there. Right. It's better. So this button here isn't going to be what we need at all. That's fine, we don't really care. Instead, we're going to create a new version of the chat box line, which is a chat box option. This is going to have a button attached to it. So to do this, we're going to add in a button, as you might have suspected. So UI button. We're going to go stick the button on the right-hand side of our chat box. So come on. Make it a pivot point of 1 and then set it off of -5. We're going to make it fairly small, this button. There's no reason for it to take up quite this much space, so maybe 100. And the button's text, we can probably find something generic that will work 90% of the time. For now, we'll just say yes, or do this maybe. Okay. There, that's good. Okay. Let's change it so that our text is a little bit easier to read. Make it darker and bolder. And it's obviously far too large. There we are. So the idea is we'll click on that when we want to do something. Of course, the actual text box here has to be smaller so that it doesn't overlap with our new little button. So how do we set this up so that it feels right? Well, there are actually other ways to do this visually. We're going to go ahead, and these are temporary, so we're not going to worry too much about the physical layout of this, other than to note that it's easy enough to create a version of this which is taller, because you can just set the preferred height to whatever you want. So we could, for example, have it have a message and then have a button down here. But for now, off to the side seems fine. And we're going to create a new variant on the chat box script. Right now, there is no chat box script. We are not using one. The line itself has no script attached to it. So that's going to be our first step for today. We're going to want to have a script attached to these line objects. Scripts, chat system, chat line. It is Sunday, right? Yeah, Sunday. Just checking. It's been a while since I haven't had any viewers. It's refreshing. Xarden stopped in. I think Xarden is the first person to be here, and that's because he is on the European time, and it's not the middle of a beautiful Sunday for him. It's the end of a beautiful Sunday, I hope. So we're going to have a couple of things here for our chat line. First things first, are we using any... No, we're not. There's no namespaces involved here. There probably should be, though, because this is going to get annoying. I guess if they all start with chat, who cares? So for here, we're going to need a public text. We're going to need a public button. And we're going to need a public string line to say. And then we're going to need a public... not a public float, just protected float counter. And the basic idea here is that our counter will go up and we will reveal more of the line we wish to say. Now the key to this little mess is that we actually say the whole line at once and we just leave the rest of the text white. Background colored. And the reason for that is because it will make sure that we don't have any weird situations where we have words that pop up and down or changes in height and stuff like that. So it should work fine. So in order to do this chat line, we are going to need to be able to specify what line we want to say. And the thing is, we can just set it here. We don't have to worry about it. So I'm just going to make it so that you can just set it when you initialize it. So generally set this when you initialize. And the same thing here. We might come up with something more complicated later, but for now, let's keep it real simple. And so here in update, what we're going to do is we're going to count. So counter plus equals time.delta time. Like so. And we're going to want to create a string for our text box. But the text box already has an attached element that probably uses a string creator. I'm trying to remember, the string creator is its own object, isn't it? Is that called a string creator? It must be in a subset somewhere where I don't know where that is. String creator. You gonna suggest to me where it is? No, you're not. Okay, that's fine. Even if it's a little bit lossy, we can just create strings. So here what we're going to do is we're going to create a visual for our, ooh, something screwy. Let's go ahead and save this, close it, and reopen it, even though this is the first time it's been opened today. So we're going to want to have a line that is made up of a black part and a white part. So specifically, we're going to go and just split this into two different pieces. So we're going to say string visual. That's fine. If counter is greater than or equal to line to say dot length, then visual equals line to say. Else visual equals substring, no, line to say dot substring. There we are. And Fmel's Beer came in. Hello, welcome Fmel's Beer. We're finishing up some dialogue stuff today, and then we'll probably do some spaceship modeling later. Won't that be fun? So if seal to mathf dot seal to int. There. Perfect. And we don't want to do 1 per second. We'll do like 5 per second. This is the most basic way we can do this. The other thing we're going to want to do is use this same substring, but surrounded with color equals FFF. I think that's how we do it in Unity. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it sounds right. Yeah, that's fine. We'll know pretty soon whether that's right or not. So that's how we do it. Later on, we'll have some kind of dismission system. But what we're going to want to do probably is set this up as a button, or at least something that has a response on it. So this image here that we're using, it's the core image. See this thing? So what we're going to do is we're going to add an event responder, which responds to clicking and tells us to delete ourselves. So public void click. Destroy game object. I set that up, click. But we haven't actually put the chat line here yet, so let's do that. There we go. So our image will go ahead and tell the chat line to delete itself or get clicked. So with that in mind, we've got a couple of things that we want to do. We want to set up this description as our text. We do not have a button. And the line to say will be right. Sound good? Let's see how it looks. Well, it did not work right. That's because this is not getting installed correctly. That's fine though. So that should work. And what we're going to want to do is set this up so that the button gets revealed if there is a button. So we haven't done that yet, but we're about to. Down here we have this image. It's underneath the button. So if you click on the image, it can do this pointer click, but it won't fall through from the button. So won't that be nice? And we will tell it to click to dismiss it. And that should do. We're going to want to have this button do something though. So let's have public void choose. Make this dismiss. Debug.log choosing the line and then the line to say. So with that in mind, we're going to have to redo our eventing, but that's fine. Oh, that didn't work. There we are. So that's choose, and this is dismiss. And this is dismiss. Perfect. So that should be what we need. Let's go ahead and save these in the correct spot. So we don't have a chat box option yet. There we go. The chat box line, we can apply the changes. There we go. Make sure that actually did apply them. Yeah, good. Oh, we forgot to actually set the chat box option up. We got to do that at some point. Otherwise, we'll feel real dumb. Like so. Apply. So with that in mind, what we're going to want to do is make it so the button pops into existence when we have said everything we need to say. So button dot enabled or button dot visible, button dot we have this button as a button. We can just disable the whole button. So button dot game object dot set active false. Oh, true. That was the true one. The other one's the false one. There we go. So with that in mind, we'll only see the button when it's done typing. So right now what we've got is a setup where when we try to create the chat block, we get this line and we tell it to do something. Here we say, de blah de blah de blah de blah. This is no longer going to be a game object. It's now going to be a chat line. text line prefab. And then down here, when we want to do this, it's a text line, a chat line. And it's chat line. And then here we say g dot line to say equals line. Like so. And then what we can do is we can go up to our chat box and we can drop in the new prefabs that we need. So as you can see, the text line prefab went away because we changed it. So we're going to drop in the options. The option box will have the button attached to it, so that'll be nice. It'll work well. We're gonna need to save this chat box. So there, it's now saved. And let's see whether or not it works. My voice is real hissy today, like my teeth are covered in plastic. So we're gonna wait for a minute. Boom. So that happened too fast, as you might have noticed. So here's the chat box option. This got set up, but it didn't actually get initialized. See how it says, hi, I wanted to say blah, blah. It should say I broke the water cooler or whatever it was that she broke. So what's going on here? The chat line's update doesn't appear to be getting called. Debug.log chat line update. Well, we definitely see this as chatline update happening. It doesn't appear. Text.text equals visual. All right, let's try that again. Gotta remember to wire your code up, everybody. 99% of coding is just remembering to put the damn wires in. And boom. That's obviously too slow. You see how that happened? Nice, huh? And we hit this button here. It should say something, but unfortunately it's really busy. There we are. So we can select it. If we click here, it goes away. It should go away. It doesn't go away. That's interesting. I wonder why. Did we screw up the chat box option image? Chatline.dismiss. Pointer click. Is it not supposed to be a pointer click? Is it supposed to be some other kind of click? No, that's correct. Well, let's go ahead and put in a debug line here. Debug.log dismissing line and then line to say. Delete this. Try it one more time. If you've been keeping tabs on my Twitter, you know that I've been struggling to make a an SSTO, sort of SSTO thing look decent. So that's probably what we'll go back to doing after we are done with this. So clicking is not doing anything here. Oh! The text line is on its own layer and it's actually on top. So we have to tell it that the text line cannot be clicked. So to do that, we're going to drop in this chat box again. No, inside the content. There you go. And then we'll drop in the chat box line here. And then we'll drop in the chat box option here. And the text needs to be set to be non-interactable. Boom. Boom. Perfect. Now we'll try it one more time. Normally the text box is on top of the image, as in a child of the image, But I couldn't do that because I was flipping the image on the x-axis, and I didn't want to re-flip the text box. So, yeah, good, it works. Alright, so that's cool. Another thing we can do is this chat block. We can say when our various child objects change, we would like to have something happen. And what we want to have happen is if we're out of child objects, we want to self-destruct. Now to do that, what we're going to do is take a look at the other object which does this, and that is the ship parts list. So down here in scripts, we can go down to ships. You can take a look at the parts list for our ship. Ship component, nope, ship component list. This is probably it. Alright, so we've got a variety of things here, but the one that we want to take a look at is on transform children changed. This is the function we want, and it's built right into our Unity system. So what we're going to do is we are going to say that if this chat block only has one child, self-destruct. If transform.childCount equals 1, destroy game object. We'll go ahead and put a debug in. Debug.log out of things to say. Chatterer.avatar.name plus out of things to say. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and give this a shot. See whether or not we can get this to feel right. There we go. Wait a little bit of time here, and in a moment, boom! I broke the yeah. We don't care. Good, great. So we have that working. Now we need to expand it so that it can say multiple things, and we also let me get out a piece of paper. Because if I start to forget this stuff, I'll feel real dumb later. I've only got this green pen. All right, fine. We are going to write all these notes in green pen. Chatter. Multiple lines with each leading to the next. Buttons that work. Okay, so the problem with buttons that work is that we don't have a backend for them. We can have our button do something, but what is it going to do? We don't have any concept of our options or how to implement them. So we're going to start with the idea of multiple lines and each line leading to the next. What we're going to do is here we're actually going to multiply this by a value that we can make an option, or we can just hard code it. We're just going to hard code it for now. There's no reason for it to be an option just yet. But what we've got is a chat block, and the chat block needs to be able to say multiple lines in a row. To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to have a list of lines, public list string upcoming lines. But here's the thing. This list is going to be creating a possible button clickable thing. So how do we link it to a clickable button thing? What we really need to do is have a dictionary in order. No, I guess we'll just create a little struct or a little class. That's fine. So public struct dialog line. Public string dialog and public string keyword. Pass this back when clicked. Leave empty for no button. So here we've got this text line prefab. We're going to need two of these. We're going to need one that's a line and one that is a choice. So text choice prefab. All right. We're going to need to have this list of dialog lines, upcoming lines. We might as well make that serializable, system.serializable. And that should work well enough. So the next thing we're going to need to do is when we actually tell it to say something, we're just going to have it string line string keyword equals null. And we're just going to have it turn the content size filter back on. I still haven't downloaded the most recent version of Unity, so I haven't tested that yet. Unity bug stuff. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just go ahead and add it to our list. So dialog line dl equals new dialog line dl.text dl.dialog equals line and dl.keyword equals keyword. And then we can say upcoming lines dot add dl. And then here public void immediately say string line string keyword equals null. So we say chat line G, and we say if keyword equals null, or keyword.length equals 0, G equals chatline.instantiate text line prefab, else chatline.instantiate text choice prefab. And then we give it the line to say, and we can set up its keyword, g.keyword equals keyword. Obviously, it doesn't have a keyword yet. Let's go ahead and set that up. Oh, we're not even going to do that. We're just going to set the button up. So g.button dot on pointer click on click. Here it is. So boom, boom, boom. And then we're going to have to add in a new on click. So to do that, well, we got a couple of options as to how we want to do this. What we really want to do is actually have a special case, not for the button, but for the line itself. So public string event chosen. We just say chosen dot invoke and wait, do we have to do it like this? There are lots of ways to do this. I guess this might be the easiest way to do it. So we'll go ahead and just pass the keyword. Obviously, we don't have a keyword yet, so public string keyword. So with that in mind, we can say g.chosen, string event chosen. I guess it should be onChosen, shouldn't it? g.onChosen .add listener choose option chosen. And we need to have an option chosen, so public void option chosen string keyword. One of our lines had an option in it, and we've chosen that option. Now, we have a couple of options here. The easiest option is to just create another string event. Public string event option on option chosen. On option chosen dot invoke keyword. Debug.log chat block or avatar, what is it called? Chooser? What was it? Chatterer. Dot avatar. Dot name plus chose, we chose keyword, that's fine. There we go. And that should allow us to link the chat block up to the character or anything else that it needs to be linked to in the future. This should allow us to create new dialog options, but you'll notice that there's a piece of wiring missing. And if you haven't noticed, shame on you, there's always a piece of wiring missing. We've forgotten to actually tell the chat block to pop up the chat lines. We removed that. We put in say, and then we put in immediately say, but there's no connection between the two. So here in update, what we're going to do is we're going to want to say the next line if there is one. But how do we do that? Well, we could check and see whether the current line is ready, or we could add in another event. So public unity event. Oh, it looks like we need to add in the event system. Public unity event line complete. So here what we're going to do is protected bool line complete yet equals false. Down here what we're going to do is, if we have this, we're going to say if line complete yet. And so if we haven't completed our line yet, then line complete yet equals true. Set the button to on, and set the visual line to say. All of this stuff only needs to be done the first time it happens. And lastly, line complete.invoke. So that optimizes away some of our wasted cycles, but it also creates a nice little invocation that we can catch with our chat block. So g.linecomplete.addListener next. And of course, we're going to have to create a new function called next. Public void next. We're going to say if lines, upcoming line dot count equals 0, then we just go debug.log done chatting. Again, we're going to want their name, so chatterer.avatar.name plus done chatting. We should probably have the avatar's chatterer. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit easier on us. Come on. So we find the declaration, and then we're going to go ahead and say public new string name get return avatar.name. That way we don't have to keep putting in lines of random this. We don't need that anymore. Makes our debugging a little bit easier at the very least. All right. Well, this is all very exciting, I'm sure you'll agree. So the next step here is to make next actually do what it's supposed to do. So when we're done chatting, we return. Otherwise, we want to get the first element off of the line. So immediately say chatterer 0 dot, sorry, it's not chatterer, it's upcoming lines 0 dot dialog, comma, upcoming lines 0 dot keyword. And then we remove it from the list. So upcoming lines dot remove at 0. And that should, in theory, say a lot of things. Now, the chat block currently has this setup where we tell it to say one thing, because that's the only thing we've got right now. See this? Live say, string text. Because of that, we don't really have any way to hook this up and test it yet. Let's just go ahead and copy it a few times so that we can get a feel for whether or not it works. And we'll go ahead and tell it to do various things here. Blah. Here we are. That should give us a mix of buttons and not buttons, in theory. Let's try it out. All compile errors. I don't want to compile errors. Okay, so here it's string visual, and then it's got this if else, and the problem is that we don't set visual here. So what we're going to do is move this into these else loops. All right. Come on, let's get it going. There we are. So when it hits 10, it's going to hit our test point, and we're going to see a whole bunch of people start talking. Okay, so it says that they're chatting, but it didn't actually instantiate any of their elements, their chatting elements. If we take a look at the chat block, our upcoming lines are filled with upcoming lines. Of course, the very first line, there is no children. We haven't started yet. So the very first line needs to have itself manually pumped. So here where we say upcoming lines.add, we say if upcoming lines, is this really the right time to do it? So we'll say if transform.child count equals 1, there's only one child when we start, then we're going to want to immediately say it. So next. There are a variety of race conditions involved with checking other kinds of firstness, but that one should be pretty reliable. Once again, we'll wait until it hits 10, and hopefully we'll see all of that stuff pop in. Boom, there we are. I broke the propellant tank clone, and then it broke. The object you want to instantiate is null. Oh, we forgot to actually set up our chat box correctly. Gotta wire it up. If you don't wire it up, nothing's gonna happen. Or rather, you're just gonna get big fat red errors. So let's drop in our chat box here. Boom. And our chat box needs a choice prefab as well as a line prefab. So there we are. Apply that. Delete it. Hit play. And then wait for it to hit 10 again. Boom. It didn't work. Oh, why did you break? So yeah, idiot. I forgot to actually check if there was a button. If button, turn the button on. If there's no button, don't turn the button on. Adoy. Usually I use different objects, different classes for interactables and non-interactables, but in this case I didn't. Button.gameObject.setActive. I forgot to check it twice, didn't I? Ah, yeah. Error me once, shame on me. Error me twice, shame on me again. My eyes are running. It's finally spring here in Boston, and it turns out I'm allergic to it. Alright, there we go. You can see how it's all popping up. So you can see there are a couple of small issues here. These are not growing properly. They are staying the same size. That's a problem because we need them to be the proper size. If we go over into these objects, here is one of our chat boxes. And the problem is that it is not increasing in size as the contents increase in size. It's forcing them to shrink. Oh, hold on, unpause here. I mean, this has the preferred height, see? And we could, what if we set up it with a min height? It crushes the others down. So there's something screwy going on with this. Obviously, the content size fitter, I'm suffering from that really dumb bug where it goes in the reverse order that it should, and so I'm turning it off manually. But it should work. I mean, it should be turning itself on and doing that stuff. This is what's malfunctioning here, and it's this hack that I put in specifically to make it refresh the size of the object. So here in Next, we create stuff, but we don't actually re-enable the content size fitter. However, when I manually re-enabled the content size fitter, it didn't do anything. So this should be down here in next, or immediately say. I don't think that'll fix it, but it's worth a try. It might be time for us to switch over to modeling, just because this is a bug that should be fixed by updating to the next version of Unity. And I gotta tell you, that's not something you want to do on camera. Yeah, that worked. Good. It was just in the wrong spot. So you can see that they continue to talk, and the talking gets longer and longer and longer. But you should be able to drag it around. You can drag it around, but the event catcher on these catches that event and prevents you from doing it while clicking on the text. So that means that we might have to have a different approach to handling the clickable text boxes. Now, you can drag it when you're on a button, see? So somehow, the buttons don't make that trick happen. Now, the buttons use a different path. You see, this is a button script rather than an event script. So it might be best if we switch all of our images into buttons. And that's not as hard as it sounds. We've only got 2 images. So we'll drop in the chat box, then we'll drop in the chat box line. And I'll drop in the chat box options. And we'll just take this image and we'll add a button to it. Now the button can do color tinting. And this is a good little trick, so we might as well do it. The idea being that when we highlight it, we can highlight it as gold to let you know that you're about to dismiss it. So make it pressed red here, that's fine. You could use pointer up, but I don't want to risk anything interfering, and I know that the buttons don't interfere, so I might as well use them. And obviously the only thing we need is to tell the chat box that it's being dismissed. And we will remove this event trigger. Boom. Now this event trigger we can copy, and we will put it on the other image right here. So paste. There. This can go away, and this is our same object, but obviously we want to put it against that chat box instead of the first chat box. Dismiss. So that should work. We'll just save this and this, and then we will delete them. Working with those nested prefabs is always a little bit itchy because Unity doesn't really understand what's going on. You will only save the prefab that you're currently on, and those prefabs stop being prefabs if you save the prefab, their parent prefab, so we have to be careful. That should be okay though. So here we are, we can drag based on these now. You see that? Now the button has some annoying feature in that it stays selected even if you haven't clicked it. So to get around that, what do we do? Can we tell the button to de-highlight? If we set it to none, navigation none, will that make it so it stops being highlighted after you drag it? Because that's, I mean, unsuitable. It's not good enough. Let's hit play and find out. You should have gone away. Oh, I was debugging with someone's name and there was no name there. That's fine. So here is the idea. Will it go away? So this seems to go away, whereas this stays selected. See that? So that worked. Good. We can just change the navigation style and it will function. All we have to do is change this image to have no navigation as well. There we go. Perfect. And we'll save that, apply, and delete that. And we now should have a fully functional system. The problem with this fully functional, Fmelsbeer says, yeah, I think I already said this. Fmelsbeer was suggesting we use on pointer up. After this, we'll have a fully functional chat system, sort of. The problem is we don't have anything we want to say, So we're going to have to think of things that we want to be able to click on. Now, obviously, they're not just going to go ahead and say the same thing over and over. What we want them to say is things like, I can fix it using our spare parts menu, or I can keep it running, if I were to put all my time into it. Now, the problem is that their suggestions need to be generated in a couple of different ways. So let's cross off the buttons that work in the multiple lines. We just did those. And now what we need is for this to have plans that happen. So fundamentally, the difficult part of this is that there are several different categories of option, and all of them require new back-end code. For example, if I want to repair one object, I've got to have some method of choosing another object, making sure that that object has enough resources to count, and breaking it to repair the first object. That one's not so bad, but how about the one where I assign someone to continuously baby the object? I need to choose someone, but not someone who's constantly babying another object. They're busy. And it needs to be someone with a high enough repair skill, although we haven't really gotten to the repair skill stuff yet, or technical skill. So I guess I can just tackle them all one at a time here and come up with a method of doing it. But these options are all options that need to play out in the same fundamental framework so that they can be assigned to happen or spawned in via mod or happen over the course of just random happenstance. So this means we're going to have a new category of object, a new fundamental type of thing, which would be called a plan or an event, a character event? It's something that happens to or because of a character. Character event might be okay. Let's call it a character event. And this is an entirely new category of thing, which is why I've held off on creating it for a while. New C# script character event. So there are a couple of different kinds of things we might think of for a character event. One of them is that it could just be an interface. But Unity does not show interfaces very well, so it's difficult for us to do it as an interface just because Unity will panic. Another thing we could do it as is a delta serializer. That's what we use for ship parts and stuff. The advantage of a delta serializer is that it can be saved into your ship's specs, which is probably pretty important. So this is going to have to be a delta serializer. There we go. And because it's a delta serializer, that means that it has a few fundamental functions in it that are kind of nice, and we'll talk about that when we need them. So we're going to have to watch out, though, because a delta serializer doesn't understand the concept of a ship object or a character. Those are Unity objects, and they don't serialize to JSON very well. So we have to save references by name and or location in order to do those correctly. Well, there are going to be a lot of different kinds of character events, and not all of them are going to involve parts. So we're going to just start with the most basic one, which is public avatar or social brain. Avatar? Do we want to make it an avatar? Not an avatar, though. It's custom avatar? Come on. There we are. Can't hit the A button on my keyboard. Public avatar. So what have we got here? Custom avatar. It is custom avatar. What do you call a responsible party? The triggerer. We can always change it later. It's no biggie. Tooltip. Whoever is ultimately Oh, we'll call it a designer. Let's go ahead and use a thesaurus. Thesaurus designer. Architect, that's a good one. Deviser. Originator. Originator's probably closest. Founder. I think I will probably use originator unless one of you guys has a better idea. Whoever is ultimately the root of this plan. So that will be whoever either caused the plan or came up with the plan. Often they're going to be the same. In fact, they're always going to be the same if there is one person, you know. If it's whichever one of those exists, and if they both exist, it's both. So because of that, we are going to have a lot of different types of character event over the course of the game. The problem is that we need a way to distinguish between them in rather complex ways. As delta serializers, these are mono behaviors, and they get attached to game objects. That may sound like it's a clunky and heavyweight way to do things, and it is. It's not so clunky or heavyweight that I care much, because when you turn a game object off, it's not substantially worse than anything else. So we can go ahead and keep them just turned off. It's still pretty heavyweight, but whatever. Another thing we can do is we can save anything we don't need just as JSON and not even load it into the game world, because that's what the delta serializer does. However, all that said, we can't leave them as prefabs, because if they're prefabs, then they can't contain unique references. So we will have to instantiate these, which is why in general you would go with a class that doesn't have a mono behavior attached. You know, you can just create a class. Or you could use a Unity scriptable object, I suppose, but it has all the same flaws. Either way, the delta serializer is a mono behavior. And since the delta serializer is a mono behavior, so are we. I'm not about to reprogram another variant of the delta serializer just for the sake of saving a little bit of RAM. And it should be an insignificant amount. Hopefully. So the problem is we don't have any way to save references to these custom avatars as our delta serializer. So if we add in this delta serializable, then what happens is it will just spit out an error saying that it does not understand how to do it. So what we're going to have to do is redo a little bit of the delta serializer to create a custom case so that when we try and save an originator, we save the name or some other characteristic, and when we try and load it, we load it up. But of course, in the end, we're not aiming to be serializable today, which is good, because currently all of our characters have the same name, and we wouldn't be able to save it by name because it would just be the same person over and over. We'll have to put in a little bit of a safeguard so that you can't have two people of the same name on the ship or identify them via other means. Either way, that is going to be our basis, our character event basis. And you might be wondering, how is this going to be used? Well, there are two things to remember. The character event can be a proposal, or it can be in play. Some of the ones that are in play immediately resolve. Like if I'm going to repair the engines by scrapping our life support, that immediately takes place. Or it takes place after a short time or something similar. It's not constant. Whereas on the other hand, if we have said that someone is going to be babying a particular thing until we get back to port, that's continuous. So we're going to want to have that as a Boolean here. Public bool continuous equals false. Tooltip, continuous events are added to the ship rule queue. And now you're probably thinking, ooh, ship rule queue, what's that? And the answer is, it doesn't exist! Woohoo! Let's go ahead and create it. Ship. So here's the question. Does the ship have a ship rules queue, or is there a ship rules queue, some kind of specific thing? We're going to want to create a new C# script, which we will call a rules queue. And we will add it to the ship. Now, there are a lot of ways to add it to the ship. And part of the issue here is that we're going to have to add it to all of our ship prefabs. That's okay, though. We're going to make it its own thing. No, you didn't like that? There we are. So the rules queue is also a delta serializer, and it has a bunch of delta serializers as its children. So that's going to be a bunch of these character events. Now we're going to have to, you know what, we should probably rename them before we get any further. Now that we're using the term rules queue, the character event should probably have some relation to rules. Like a rule event or character rule. I think a rule event is probably fine, right? A rule proposal. Functional rule. Rule base, because this is the base class and it doesn't do anything. So we'll just go ahead and put in comments here. The base class, we could also make it like a virtual class, I suppose. I can't remember how to do that, but we could make it one that you have to instantiate. I don't think it's called virtual. It's called something else. It's been a long time since I had to use that. Anyway, the base class for rules and events. These can be executed immediately, take time, or be semi-permanent. They usually change who does what aboard a ship and are proposed by crew members. Seems fine. So over here in our rules queue, we're going to have various rule bases. Public list ruled base rules equals new public list. There we are. We don't have to do that part, do we? Because it's going to be just part and parcel. So I guess we probably, it looks weird when I don't do that. So so here we're going to say tooltip, a list of rules currently applied across the ship, planet, whatever. So these rules are monobehaviors. This list of rules should contain all the rules physically present in our transform, because each rule is technically a monobehavior and should therefore be on a game object. All right. So that rules queue will allow us to add things to the rules queue if we would like. And because of that, we can have a variety of rule setups. So the rule base has no functionality on its own. We're going to need some way to propose new rules. So how does a character know what rules they would like to try and propose for any given problem? Well, they're coming up with a scenario, a breakdown scenario. There are a couple of different kinds of breakdown scenarios. Right now, the only breakdown scenario we're using is the one where they screw up and break something. But there are a million of them. Maybe you get hit by a micrometeorite and it just happens to coincide with a high stress point. Maybe you get in a character-on-character fight. There's a lot of different kinds of breakdown events. So what we're really going to need to do is also create breakdown events. See, this is why I've put this off. It's this massive network. It's like this crappy approach. It feels like you're trying to build something from Microsoft. You know, it's like, yes, we need the industry approved standard approach with 18 delegates and 1,000 different kinds of abstraction. But I don't see any way around it. So we're going to have a stress event here. And I don't know if that's already in use, but I don't think it is. I think that this is brand new. Oh, well, it's certainly not in use as a prefab, idiot. Yeah. Where did I put that stuff? Did I put it randomly inside of the prefabs list? I did. Wow, I'm just an idiot. Okay, so move this character events down into our scripts, because obviously that's where they should be, you idiot. There we are. What is this? Oh, wow, I had me worried for a second because it said 1 down in the corner. Underneath viewers, there's a clock, and it said 1, and I was like, a minute? Did I lose have I not been streaming for the past 59 minutes? It's an hour. Okay, that's fine. We've been streaming for an hour. So this is our stress event. Any event which happens due to a stressed out person. Typically something breaks or they throw a fit. While the event prefab can contain much information, defaults, you'll need to create a version for your specific needs in any given situation. Once again, this is going to be a delta serializable, which means that it is going to be a prefab. This is a mono behavior. It's a mono behavior and a prefab. So it's on a game object and should be spawned into the world when a character stresses out. Please note that it is not a player controller and should not be on the player control stack, but it may have a variety of other things attached, such as music or whatever. All right, so this is going to be our stress event, Delta Serializer, and a part of this is definitely going to be the default options we have for what sort of proposals we're going to do. So public up list, what did we call them? Rules. Public list rule base, and it's going to be response options. There we go. This should be a decent enough baseline for us to start thinking about this stuff. Now, we do have a situation here where these character events are not in a good a good namespace. So we're going to put them in a namespace here. Namespace rules and events. Yeah, that namespace is a little bit awkward, but there's already a namespace events in Unity Engine. And while it wouldn't collide because it's not in the Unity Engine subdomain, I just don't like having two things with the same name, even if they're in different namespaces. It just feels weird, so I'm not going to do it. There we are. So the idea here is that we have a set of stress responses, a set of stress events that the character can choose from, perhaps based on their species or based on their rank or some other factor. And they will choose these events, and these events will decide what happens to the ship, and there will be a variety of kinds of events. And the events will offer a variety of potential responses. And the player will see these responses as those chat boxes, those pop-up chat boxes. So when we break something, one of the responses will be, you know, fix it. And therefore, we will pull that response in. We will choose a random thing that can fix it. And we will then have them say, well, I could sacrifice the random thing. Click here to do so. And you can see how this is all going to start to come together. The type of namespace rule base could not be found. It's called rule base. It's right here. Rules and events. Rules and events. What? Oh, I bet it was because that other file hadn't been saved. That's fine. So, just to give you an example, all 4 of these characters would choose a random stress event when they had their stress event happen, and then these lines would be description of the stress event and then proposed responses from the stress event's rule-base response queue. You pick one of the rule bases. It's not going to be a rule base, though. It's going to be a descendant class. That will get executed. Executing it may add it to the ship's list of rules, or it may just do something. Or some combination. Anyhow, that's the basic idea here, but you know, I am going to just doodle this down in green and then switch over to doing some modeling because my brain is a little bit fried and I'm not 100% sure that this is the approach I want. If you guys have a better opinion on the approach I should take, feel free to let me know. Although there's only maybe 2 people watching. So we'll take a look here. We'll say that this stress event... This green pen is awful. The stress event and the rules queue both use a list of rule bases. Player choose. It goes into the rule queue. Difficulties, turning prefab settings into targeted vals and serializing them. All right, well, that was fun. Let's do some modeling, just because I am ready to switch to modeling. We've only been going for an hour, but my brain feels like I've done 3 hours of work, so we're stopping. I'll just post to Twitter that I am doing stuff. Done coding. Stream is now switching to 3D modeling. Whee! Paste. Indie dev. Yeah, my tweet was rather popular among the random stupid bots that always retweet any sort of hashtag that you come up with. It's very, very sad that those bots exist to me. I just don't like them. But we're switching over to 3D modeling, and we've got some new digs. We've got a new kind of ship. It's the same kind of ship that we had last week, or last time. I haven't done any work on the cockpit since then, but I have worked on a number of other elements. That's not it. This is it. So the idea here is that this is a single-stage to orbit vehicle It's T1, so it's not too advanced. It's like, you know, 2030s or 2025, something like that. And I'm still working on the details. This core node here is too big, and I'm thinking about how I want it to look. So maybe I will spend a little bit of time winnowing down this before I do anything else here. So we're going to call this a core node. And we're going to try and make it so that it's not so huge. It just feels like it's too big to be on a plane. You know what I mean? So you can see this, the character size this is definitely larger than we need it to be. So if we just select the whole thing and set it to active element and set our active element to something that is precisely in the middle, like there. There we are. That's not a very good thing to do. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this without creating stupid. But creating stupid is kind of the standard. What I really need to do is not scale this front element. So I need to scale everything else, but not this front hall. So we're going to take this front hall and hide it. Like this. There we are. So now we can take everything else and shrink it. Yup. Okay, that's that. Yup. So you can see that it's now considerably smaller. And if we unhide, you can see that it still connects correctly. This part may need a little bit of adjustment. So as a substantially smaller, shorter element, it's a little bit more acceptable. And it's not so small that it feels wrong. It's just about right. But I think I can compress it even more. If I take these right here, don't need you. We want all of this guy. Not so sure. We'll give it a shot here. I think I want this as well. That's about right. And then deselect this part. And then if we were to scale it on the y-axis, like so, we would end up shrinking it rather substantially, like so. And then we could pull forward the back end here. Whoa, I've got some damage there. Hold on. Let's move this whole thing out of the way. All right. Alright, so we can shrink it on the y-axis like we did before, and bring it forward. That's probably a little too much shrinking. Shrink on the y-axis a little bit less, and then bring it forward like this. And that's not too bad, but we do want to swing it around. So to do that, we're going to need to take this, and also this front face. Like that. And we will set this up to be an active point swing, and we will rotate it in. You can see that that's not going to work out for us. Scale X. Okay, that's a little bit better. And then we can just drag this all into the right size. Something like this. Whoa! Dragged the wrong way there, didn't I? That was unfortunate. Should be okay, though. Alright, so that is a much smaller setup. I don't think it looks too bad, but this is looking a little bit iffy. And I think the problem is that we adjusted it on a lot of axes, except we didn't adjust it on the y-axis. So it ended up being a little bit more aggressive than it otherwise would have been. You can see that we have quite a tall, narrow exit for ourselves here. We can probably shrink it a little bit. Let's take a look how it looks in terms of size. Buddy, can you get a little closer? Come on. I had it there for a second. We are. That is the size of a person. And you can see that this is pretty big even for that. I think that we can get away with shrinking it on the y-axis or z-axis until it seems a little bit more natural, like there. We can bring this down right here, and that means that we can either bring up the bottom or bring down the top even further if we would like to. And I think that would probably be wise. Do. Okay, so let's do this an easier way here. Select these insides, and then hit Control+. There we are. So, we actually don't want to select the front tips here. The rest should do. And what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to scale down here. Scale on the z-axis like this. That creates a little bit of a gentler curve. Now we've suffered some pretty bad damage to the curve of this front edge here on both the top and the bottom. And it might be a little bit tough to bring that back into shape, but I think that most of it can be done by pulling this out and forward like so. In fact, we could probably just delete that line. Oh boy, I really didn't like that. Try this. That's better. That feels a lot less bumpy. Well, on the top it does. On the bottom we still got some pretty bad ones, so we'll try and drag these into shape. That's not too bad. Now this, it feels like it's floating, so we're going to drag the whole thing down slightly. So that it feels like it's resting nicely on a surface near the wing. Now that wing is not permanent, it's modular, but that's the right height for it, so that's where we're going to assume it's going to be. We can always change it later if we'd like. Yeah, last thing we need to do is bring these forward like so. We could shrink the whole system a little bit more if we'd like. These are in fact a little too large as they stand, so we're going to just shrink them on the z-axis and then pull them down a little bit. And you can see that this back end is slanted slightly because we pulled the front end down and we did not pull the back end down at the same time. So we'll pull the back end down. There we go. This is a very curved back end, as you can see. If we were to delete this line, That didn't work. There we are. We want to make this back edge pop similar to the way that the rest of the edges pop, and to do that, we're just going to adjust it until it is feeling correct. Nope, made that round. I don't want it round. This back edge is the problem here. We're going to want to cut. Can we just cut like this? So what I did is I beveled here like a lot, and it ended up causing a lot of trouble. So we're going to try and fix this area a little bit better. You can see how this bevel here is all sorts of wanky nonsense, janky nonsense. Wanky nonsense is another kind of nonsense. So that's the same that we've got upstairs, with a slightly different set of priorities. So if we were to connect here and then do a Control R and then connect these guys, is that a 4 or 5? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's a standard quad, even though it's all sorts of nasty skewed. There we are. Just set this up like this. And then we can fix up our points so that they aren't quite so bad. So you can see that what happens here is this point doesn't really end up keeping this edge crisp. But I think what I actually want to do is pull in that whole edge. Because there's no reason for it to be that big. And once that edge is pulled in, a little bit of adjustment here. We'll have the same problem that we did before, but not quite so severely. And then down here, we need to adjust these so that they are obedient, like so. We're going to want to pull this back until we get that crisp edge. Now we have an issue down here where it is all sorts of weirdly shaped. And what we're going to do is we're just going to turn this into a more basic shape. It's okay if it's a little bit bad because it doesn't really matter. We'll probably have to redo this in the long run anyway. But it should be something that doesn't feel wrong, if you know what I mean. So this, just bring these back. Vaguely right, I guess. That's good enough. It's better than it was. So let's pull this back down. Dunk. So we've now shortened it and shrunk it substantially. Just to compare and contrast, this is what it was before. So that's a pretty big difference. Now if we were to bring some of these modules up to snuff, you can see that it gives us a lot more room to play with, and it doesn't feel nearly as unnatural as that huge one. It still probably needs some work, but it's not terrible, and that's important. And then we can get the wing shape like this. Not too bad, not too bad. Oh, there's just not a... I was confused for a second there, but there's just only one of these guys. Speaking of one of these guys, let's go ahead and make some of the modules that we're going to be fitting into these guys. There are going to be a lot of different multi-purpose modules you can just slot in here, with the idea being that they are going to feel relatively aerodynamic. So let's go ahead and get to work. Let's just push this aside. I think that that's a 2-meter gap, maybe a little bit less. So we'll go ahead and start with a nice 2-meter circle. And if we extend that back, you can see how big it is in comparison to where we're trying to fit. Just under 2 meters seems like the right size in terms of width. So scale, Shift Z. Shift, yeah, that should be right, right? Yeah. Scale, Shift Z. Okay, so Shift Z is not what I wanted. Scale, Shift S. I guess we can just do S because we're not doing the whole thing. Let's do the whole thing. Scale, Shift Y. There we are. That's what I wanted. Scale, Shift Y, 0.9. So that's 1.8 meters. That seems about right. If we bring this forward like so, we can start to model in the front. So the first thing we're building is a Werner jet. These are heavy control jets that use rocket fuel, and that makes them suitable for a ship that needs to maneuver frantically, especially one that needs to maneuver frantically through, say, an atmosphere when trying not to explode. So, to create these jets, we're just going to cut them into the surface of our system here by going Control R and split. And we will just make them inside these positions. Now, the two basic options are we can have several in a row or we can have big ones. I like several in a row, so that's what we'll do for today, like this. And then we'll grab some surface elements like this, and extrude. And then we'll go up here, grab this, and this, and down below. And extrude. Can we select the other guys? No. Okay, so we have to manually select them again. That's fine. Doop. So now that we've got these, we can shrink inwards, as you can see. And if we press Shift Y, we'll only shrink on the two axes that we care about. Now, since we're not doing the full object, we're not getting a very good shrink. So we'll switch over to using the 3D cursor, which is at 0, 0, 0. And then we'll do S and Shift Y. And that gives us a nice inset. See? We can also do a nice extrude if we would like, but the inset is a better option for us at the moment. So now what we're going to want to do is switch over to individual mode, extrude, and then smooth. Now there is actually an option to smooth into circles, if I can remember where that is or what it is. Circle select is the opposite. Beautify faces? I wonder what that is. I don't know. It's not what I want, though. Clean up. Normals, faces. Weld edges into faces. Shade smooth, shade flat. No, none of those. Yeah, well, there's the edge slide. I've been looking for that for a while. Merge, rip, extend, separate, bevel, smooth, blend from shape. Is that what I needed? No. Maybe it's not somewhere I can find it. I know that I've seen someone use it. but I don't see it. So we're just going to go ahead and use the old-fashioned method of smoothing. The problem with this method is that it does not, it leaves us squarish, and that's not great. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select these interior faces, like this, and then we're just going to tell it to scale along the z-axis, x-axis, y-axis, one of those axes, like so. I'm going to shrink. Oh, it shrunk too much. Select the very center point and scale that on the y-axis just a little bit. Right. And now we can grab these and make them into nozzles. This is probably not the recommended way to do it. I'm just kind of trying to feel my way through Blender. After spending a little bit of time yelling at Blender, I'm like, I should probably try to learn some of these random-ass broken things that Blender does, so that they won't feel so random-ass and broken. To me, at least. Here we are. Vernier jets. Ah, well, interesting. That's, not right. I'm gonna have to do this manually for each one of them, aren't I? You bastards. All right, now 2 guesses as to what comes next. Beveling! Everybody loves to bevel, right? So the problem with beveling in this case, as you can see, it actually distorts the shape of these faces along the edges. See that? So while that distortion might not be noticeable to the average person, I think it's probably best if we were to use loop slicing instead. After all that selecting, I decided not to do it once I saw what it looped like. No shame in that. You're always going to waste some time, especially if you are me. And we're going to try and select both the middle and the bottom here. Then we can scale them down to adjust how this looks. See? Now, since we're scaling locally to each one, each of these rings counts as its own ring and is not being scaled towards the other ring. So because of that, we can get a fairly sharp look. So we're going to scale it in like that. All right, so let's set up our smooth shading, and then we'll do an auto crease at 30 or so. That's about right. And then we're going to want to stick on some materials. So we're going to have hull, we're going to have heavy hull, we're going to have warning, and we're going to have the glow. Do we have an engine glow here? We should have an engine glow, right? I think I was using warning for the engine glow, so that's obviously not right. Actually, no, we don't have to do that. Let's go ahead and just use interior mechanisms. There we are. So if we were to grab that and then hit Shift G and select polygon sides, no. This really isn't very good at selecting large elements, unfortunately. As you can see, it's selecting like ridiculous chunks of element. So we do have to do this the old-fashioned way, I'm afraid. And hit plus, so you can see that that selects both the bottom and that outside crease. If we hit minus, it won't deselect the bottom. Fun trick, because the bottom filled in. So if we take a look at this as a material, you can see what we're doing here is we're trying to get this to be distinct in any way we can. Now, we've got this base here that we can fill in using anything we'd like, but I think I'm going to use interior mechanisms again. Now we're going to want to have some warnings. And we have some heavy hull elements now that we would like to set up. Actually, what we want to do for heavy hull is everything except what we've already set up. So what I need to do is use a box select and hold Control, I believe. What is that? B Control? No. B Alt? No. B Shift? B Shift. So B Shift. B Shift. There we are. Actually, a little bit more. B Shift. Yeah, that's better. And that's going to be our heavy hull. There we go. We're also going to go ahead and do heavy hull down here. And that's how it currently looks. We could probably do some beveling to make it softer. There's a lot of stuff we can do to make it a little bit better. But what I actually want to do is add in some shiny and make this area look like it is supposed to be shiny. So selected, 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 ticka, 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 and shiny. Right, so if we drag this away, that's how it currently looks. Obviously this end is not going to work, so let's go ahead and fix it up. So here is our current end. And what we're going to want to do is extrude slightly, like maybe there. Then we can use the Shift-Alt-S to skew it on the Y-axis because it fits into that skewed base, like so. And then we can just extrude in and flatten. Our fill in the face there will make that a warning, and we will make all of this back end shiny metal. And then we'll take this, we'll extrude it back along the Y-axis, and then shrink it. And this will also be all heavy hulls. Yeah. It's a little bit basic, but I'm trying to figure out the best way to make it look fun and decent. This is a little bit too long, so let's pull this in. There. Well, that doesn't seem too bad for a first attempt. We'll call these the vernier thrusters. I believe that's how you spell them. Let's just double check that. Vernier thrusters. Yeah, vernier thrusters. Intended to do fine adjustments using rocket fuel. Alright, so that's going to be our vernier thrusters, and those are going to be useful for use in situations where you need a lot of thrust. So if we were to take this and rotate it back into its standard position, we can move it over and see how it docks up with our new capsule. Not great. I have no doubt there are people who are going to mount it up like that, but that's obviously not a great way to do that. So if we were to put it down below, it makes a lot more sense. This tank we've got down here, we can move somewhere else. We'll deal with it later. Put it back here somewhere. And then we can take this vernier thruster and put it in, and let's see how it looks. So switch over to render mode. Boom. Oh, I can't see the ground. There we are. The ground is only needed because we have some reflective surfaces and I don't want to get complacent. So the basic idea of these modules is to feel like they are vaguely atmosphere okay. And I think that that might be okay, because there is another option, and that is to rotate all of them. In the opposite direction, like this. Nothing saying we can't do that. So if we do that, then we can grab the object, put it here, and let's just delete the other one. And now if we go over into rendered mode, I guess that's a little bit more aerodynamic. That feels a little bit more space planey, to have it pointed backwards rather than forwards. And that can integrate with, I don't know, a tail or more stuff. We can put the tank on top of it, maybe. Now, notice that we didn't bother to UV unwrap or anything like that. I'm still working out these details. We can UV unwrap pretty quick when we need to, so I'm not too concerned. But if we bring this tank in to sit on top, you can see that it's just the wrong size. I guess that technically does count as sitting on top, but it's not great. What we can do, however, is flip it over like this and see whether that looks good. It's a little bit better, but not much. In the end, I guess that's as good as it's going to get, just being there. The tanks are really built to be put near the wings down here, but you can see that that completely obscures our new engines, so our new Werner thrusters, so we can move them up like this. And that doesn't look too bad. What I'm doing is I'm playing around with the positioning of these and the rotation of these because I have to make it look good for players when they want to put together this stuff. So I'm thinking of ways that this stuff can get slid together, the way the proportions work out, the way they butt up against each other. To be honest, I rather like how this looks. If you have been one of the 2 people watching, maybe take a look and tell me whether you think this looks like a decent back end for this plane. It still doesn't have any ion drives, but the basic idea seems to be looking not too bad. I'll go ahead and post a photo on Twitter. Made some Werner thrusters. Poof. Alright, so that is almost 2 hours of streaming. There are other things I want to make those modules have. For example, the antennas should be in that same module. Why don't we go ahead and do the antennas next? We'll create a heavy antenna base. Now, if we grab this and just delete it, let's not delete it, let's just move it aside some. We're going to go ahead and get started on an antenna. So this is the right form factor, this butt plug looking thing. So we're going to just do the same thing that we did. Now, this is actually not the correct rotation. Just because that rotation will never end up working out for anybody. It won't mirror properly. So what we're going to do in order to make this rotation work out is we are going to rotate it 90 degrees on the y-axis, and then we're going to apply that rotation. Because that way it'll properly get mirrored when we're in the game. Now obviously that is not the rotation it's at when it's in use, but it is the rotation that it needs for use in the game. So we're going to go ahead and create something the same basic size. It's not too tough, just a 1.8 meter diameter circle of a specific length. So like this. That was tough, as I'm sure everybody knows. Flip the direction here. So when we are trying to deploy an antenna, we're basically going to want to have it go out. We're going to want this one to be one that can be stuffed into this case either direction, because you may want it to slide this way or you may want it to slide this way. But the basic idea is that the antenna is going to ratchet out. And do we want to go backwards or straight out? I think straight out might be better. So we'll have it go straight out. So if we take this and cap it off, we can then take these caps. Nope. There we are. Shrink these caps down so that we have a little bit of taper. And then we can taper the caps like so. And taper them here as well. And then when we want to have this antenna pull straight out, what we're going to need is a hole that is the right shape for our antenna. Well, let's go ahead and create our antenna first. So that's going to be another round circle. And I guess we'll just duplicate this. No, I don't want it to be 30. Oh, I guess it's fine. Yeah, we'll duplicate it. Do we have another? Did I accidentally duplicate it twice? No, that's fine. And then we're going to want to shrink it on the y-axis like so. Pull this in like, pull this in like so. And pull this in. And then pull it in again. Like so. More or less. And then we're going to want to duplicate this. This is way too big, though, in terms of vertex density. So what we can do is we can switch over to point mode, and then we can deselect, check or deselect like so, and then just tell it to dissolve those, or delete those points, dissolve verts. And even that's too much, so we're going to repeat the process, select, check or deselect, and then dissolve the verts. There we are. Fun toy if you know how to do it right, but notice that it's off. There we are. Don't think it's really necessary to get that part right, but it's worth doing. So then we can extrude this. That'll be our catch. And we'll bring this down. Come on. There we are. Extrude that, shrink it, and bring it out like this. And then we'll pull it over to the edge of our dish. This is intended to be a very lightweight dish, so it's okay if it has a lightweight antenna. You know, this connection is just stapled to the edge. We're not going to do anything. Well, we could. We could do a little bit of complexity here just for kicks. Like extrude this and then pull it forward a little bit. And then extrude this. And shrink it down. Yeah. And then we can take our edge here. Pull it out like so. And then we can rotate it on the z-axis like, well, maybe not. Just pull it. That's fine, yeah. And then we can just do a merge on these two face elements to connect them. Boom. And then we can just adjust to our heart's content. Perfect. Ish. Now, if we want to connect back up, well, this is a good spot to have our connector. So we'll just go ahead and extrude that on the x-axis like so, and square it off so that it's more or less right, and then pull it over. So with this in mind, this is our radio antenna that gets popped out of our system. And what we're going to do is we're going to select that whole thing and duplicate it. And the reason is because we're going to want to have this out and in at the same time while we're doing some processing. So I think that this is how it will look when it is in the unit, and therefore when it's out of the unit, it's going to look like this-ish. Except that's not exactly on a square element, is it? Let's go ahead and pull it until it is square with something. A half meter seems good. Just because that'll make it line up a little bit better with whatever other crap the player puts into that general location. So what we've got here is we've got this in a real bad spot. Let's punch it out. And then let's select this and let's punch it out. And then what we're going to do is we are going to select and shift select, and then we're going to look at it from the side, and then we're going to tell it to do a knife cut if we can. Knife project. No other selected objects. Okay, do I have to do it like this? Knife project. There's no knife project. So how do I do this then? Because I can't... I don't know how to do a knife project. Let me go ahead and look it up. Knife project. Knife tool, knife select, knife project. Oh, I guess what I have to do is select specific elements here. Is that what I need? So let's go ahead and just select the outer rim. Might be a little bit big. And then let's go ahead and do a knife project. Okay, so to use knife project, first while in object mode, select the cutting object and then add to that selection with shift right mouse button the object to be cut. So now enter edit mode and press knife select, or knife. It's telling me there's no other objects. I don't know what's going on here. I must be doing something stupid wrong, and someone will hopefully watch and tell me later. But for now, what we're going to do is we're just going to assume the reason that this is so close to the maximum size is on purpose. We're going to want to set up a cut right in the middle. Like so. And then we can make the outside edge fit. So if we just grab these interior elements like this, like that, and switch over to this so we can delete the faces, like so, and then we can just nurse this into a roughly circular shape. Let's turn on our editing like this, and turn it down. There we are. That's what I'd like. We're going to want to actually go one step further. Delete that. There we are. That is more or less correct. And what we can do is set this up as an interior eye job. So we need to actually do a little bit more adjusting here. These second outermost faces are not quite right. We could be using mirror editing here. There's no reason not to, aside from just being lazy, I guess. But when we're doing this, we can switch this to disable and extrude, bring it down and back. Like that, I suppose. And then we can shrink it on the z-axis rather considerably, like so. And then bring it back in like this. No, that totally borked it. So what we'll do is we will put in a face. That's good. And then we will just connect up the rest of them. Allergies. Sorry. I love sneezing directly into the mic. I'm sure that all of you really appreciate that kind of beautiful springtime music. So basically, what we need to do is make sure that this inner cut actually allows the object to fit. That one really got me. To be honest, that's probably good enough for our needs. I'm not too concerned. Let's go ahead and grab these guys. There. Now what we're going to want to do is finish this off by putting in another cut over here. Straighten it. And then this all needs to go so that we can put it down there. So delete these faces, and then we're going to connect everything up properly. That will require us to do a little bit of an extrude over here, and then we can just do a connect, 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 connect. A little bit of adjustment here. And we'll just put in a little bit of a motor. It's probably easier to do it with a box. There we are. Got a little bit of a gear now. Yeah, that should work. Keenan the Lemon stopped in to say hello. Hello. I'm just doing some arbitrary modeling right now, trying to work out how this thing is going to flatten itself. And this didn't work out too hot, so I still have to do some work to try and figure out how to make it not suck. And I think that the basic approach I took wasn't terribly bad, but I screwed it up, so we're gonna have to start it again. Keenan says he's interested in game dev, which makes sense if you're searching for game dev people, streamers. So, welcome to the channel. I'm very boring. I know it's not something you should generally say, but I really don't want anyone to think that they're about to get into some amazing stream and be like, oh my gosh, all he's doing is very painfully slowly modeling an antenna and then programming a dialogue engine. But if you do want to get the fast rundown, Keenan, my YouTube channel has a couple hundred videos on it that teach game dev at varying levels. Not all of them are great, but they're more exciting than watching me stream. Oh, bridge, edge loops, there we go. So in order to make this feel natural, I think what I'm going to do is use a technique, a shutter technique, rather than what I was doing before. So the shutter technique is the same basic idea, except that we don't select this part or this part, and then we duplicate. And then what we can do is drag it just a little bit away so that we can work on it in piece. And then deselect here, bridge edge loops. Okay, too many edge loops at once, huh? Deselect here. Deselect here. There we are. So with this, what we have is a set of doors that will close around our antenna. Obviously, the doors need to be adjusted so that the antenna fits. But on the other hand, the antenna can be adjusted. The antenna is really, really big. So the idea is that it will expand to this size once it comes out. So we will have a smaller antenna until then. And Keenan says he can bear boring stuff, so he'll be happy on my channel. If you have a love of boring stuff, boy, have you found the guy. That probably isn't too bad. Let's go ahead and select both of the doors in their full size. Switch over to doing it from the 3D cursor so that we can get a nice round scale. And then what we'll do is we will scale up this. You can see how that scales on the y-axis. Shift Y will disable that, and we can just scale it up nice and round like this. And then we can extrude, and we can scale down, once again Shift Y-ing, to bring it inside. Now that all the faces are backwards, so you just flip them. So that is the idea of how we're going to make this work. There's still the details, like all of them. So we already have this guy over here. Let's just duplicate him and bring him over. You know what? It's time to delete half of this. Nope. Come on. There we are. So if you delete half of it, you can then use a mirror modifier, and that just brings it back in whatever axis you'd like it to be on, the z-axis in this case. We're going to have to fill in a couple of places where there was no midpoint, but that's fine. And this will allow us to take this here and move it into a new position and not have to do it twice. Keenan says stuff. I don't know how long ago he said it, but he says, what tools are you using for your games? I use Unity 3D and Blender just because they're free. I have opinions on all of them, but presumably what you want to know is the ones I'm using right now, and that's Unity 3D and Blender. And you can see that that got duplicated down there. So that's the idea. So for the interior, we can see through into the interior of this object. What we're going to want to do is just duplicate this back loop here, shrink it down on all but the y-axis, and bring it forward, and then scale it up on the y-axis so that it is in the way. It is not pointed the right way. There we are. Shift-Z, like so. And then what we can do is bring, oh, it's not clipped. That's fine. Clipping it will allow us to smack it right up against the edge there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and this. Oh, that's not the right one. This and this. Editing on the inside is never fun, and you should probably learn better ways to do it rather than just trying to work through your mesh. But what we've got now is an interior object. It's not perfect, but it's substantially better than not having an interior. Nobody's going to be looking at the interior very carefully, so we're not too concerned. But we just want to make sure that when you look inside, it's not going to look really bad. Keenan says he's also using Unity 3D and he'll remember Blender since it's free. Blender is the worst of the major modeling programs, but it's the only one that's free. There are some other free modeling programs, but they're not as good as Blender, and almost all of the ones that cost money are better. ArcoSteel says, why Unity and not UE4? Well, for my project, Unity is better than UE4. The real answer is I learned Unity long before UE4 was anywhere near free or out. So I'm used to it, and when UE4 came out, I'd already adjusted my work style to fit Unity. So I was already planning games that worked well in the Unity framework, and switching over to UE4 would have meant rethinking those things within the UE4 framework, which is, the Unreal Engine is not the same kind of framework. It excels at different kinds of things, and Unity has different priorities. So it's just that my priorities were already lining up with the priorities of the game engine I was using. That's how it works. You pick things that the game engine is good at. There are license-related reasons to go with one or the other. The license for Unity is not substantially better than the license for UE4 in terms of being free or not free. But just be honest here, you should not assume that you're going to make money on your indie game, regardless of whether or not you're using Unity or UE4 or Unreal Engine. So you should be aware that the gotchas in the, you make hundreds of thousands of dollars and pay extra are relatively minor considerations, and you shouldn't be too obsessed with them. Because, to put it bluntly, unless you've made dozens of indie games, you're not going to make an indie game that makes money. It takes a lot of experience to know how to not only make the indie games, but also how to market them. All right, there we are. There we go. So let's go ahead and set up some materials and such, then we'll do some animations. These are very, very basic animations we'll be doing. We're not actually doing animations proper at all, but that's fine. Set up some auto smoothing, and then let's just take a look at how its shape works inside of our chassis here, because we may have to adjust it a little bit. You can see that this shape is not pointy enough to fit properly, so we're going to just make sure that the point is extended. So we'll switch this to connected and extend it. There we are. That should work. Yeah, that's fine. So our materials now, we're going to want a couple of materials, and that's going to include a hull, a heavy hull, some shiny metal, and some warnings. And we're also going to need interior mechanisms. There we are. These materials will all get baked down in the long run, so I'm not too concerned about them at the moment. Just mostly for speed of workflow at this point. ArcoSteel says that 90% of it is the marketing. I would say that, except it's really hard to get a game that's even good enough to try marketing. It's true that a mediocre game can be marketed well, but it's hard to even build a mediocre game. The kinds of games that most beginners build are barely games at all. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're the first games. But you need to be aware of the difficulties. Kanan says he expects no financial gain in the short run, but if he wants to convert to cash later, I will have known the tools that forces me to pay the least. These contracts change all the time, Keenan. The Unreal Engine contract is completely different than it was 3 years ago, and the Unity contract used to not have any subscriptions at all. It was just pay once and you have an eternal subscription. So these change quite radically and quite frequently. So I don't think that you can take it as guaranteed that you're going to have one specific situation with any given system, any given, hardware. Sorry, for thinking of hardware because I'm staring at hardware. Each of them has a different policy, but those policies change. That's what I'm trying to say. So Unity might be better today, or Unreal might be better today, but the other one might be better tomorrow when the people's policies change. Well, there is really no gambling involved in which is better right now. It's pretty cut and dry depending on your needs. It's just good to keep in mind that neither one of them is bad. Both Unity and UE are quite good, and it's worth keeping them open in your mind as a development path. The two are not so dramatically different that you can't develop in whichever one suits your needs better today. So that's worth keeping in mind. You can always change which one you're developing in, not in the middle of a project. That would be pretty catastrophic, but like between projects. So if your next project would be better in UE, then make it in UE. That looks more or less like I want it to. Now it's time for some animations. We're just going to do a simple shape key animation for it being closed. Now this is not something that you want to do if you are trying to get a very good animation. You will use bones for that. But it works reasonably well if you just want to quickly mock something together. And because we're not animating directly here in Blender, later on when we change it over to Unity, it won't be too hard for us to change what sort of trigger gets fired. So whether it's an animation or a shape key, we can change it later and it's not going to be too hard. So we're just going to set this up like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shrink this down so that it fits into our internals. And then we'll just move it like this. Yeah, that's fine. And then we'll take this guy, and we will just scale him up on the y-axis, move him over like this. Oh, I screwed that up, sorry. Rotate z-axis like this, and just pull it over like so, bring it down. So what is that going to look like? Let's try it out. See what it's... Oh, and these doors, when they're closed, the doors are... Oh, they're closed already. So you can see that that just shrinks it down. Now the problem with this approach is it's not a very realistic motion. So it's not the motion we would use if we were actually going to be playing this animation. But at the moment, all I care about is having it either open or closed. So this is an easy way to do that. Boy, that's ugly, though. This is definitely one of those situations where we should use bones. I just don't want to clutter it up right now. That's fine. For now, this is going to work. We can just mock it up like this and then change it over later. One of the great benefits of doing this kind of development. So this is going to be our antenna. Now the thing is, I actually think that this antenna could stand to be bigger and heavier and more noticeable. So let's do that. Let's grab this antenna. Yoink, and scale it up and move it out. You know what? We should just scale up this part. You can see that it did not scale exactly evenly, but that's not too bad. We don't care that much. Is that even? That's even. And then we'll pull it forward a little bit to give it that depth that it might like. There we go. And then what we'll do is we'll pull the whole thing out. Now, obviously, that's going to require some kind of telescoping arm in reality. Our version of this doesn't have a telescoping arm built into it, but you know how easy it is to build a telescoping arm? You just grab your arm and you make a part of it bigger. There we are. We now have a telescoping arm. Fun! So if we take a look at how that looks with our closed key now, you can see that it still works okay. Good enough. Let's see how that looks when we plug it into our ship, shall we? So this is our antenna, and we can just slot it right into our ship prototype, like so. And if it fits, that would be better. There we are. So you can see that when you drop it in, it looks like this, which isn't too bad. We could also rotate this because there's nothing preventing us from, rotating it all the way up to almost 90 degrees. 90 degrees is a little bit awful because it cuts into it a little. We could rotate it to like, this. Give ourselves some ears. And I think I'm done for the day. If you have any last-minute questions, feel free to let me know. I stream Sundays and Wednesdays for about 2 hours. So we haven't even put this stuff in Unity yet, but it's supposed to be an SSTO for the T1 tech level, which means nothing to you unless you've been following my game quite closely. But that should be fine. There is our antenna. And I will post this to Twitter, and then I will sign off. So this is a streamlined antenna module. IndieDev, paste. We'll just take a closer look. And rotate it. Maybe just Alt-R. No, not that. This. There we are. And then we can put it in closed. Okay. There we go. Posted to Twitter. All right. Doesn't appear to be any more questions. I think I've only got a couple of people who just left me on in the background while they do their own work, which is fine. But you don't tend to ask any questions, so I'm going to sign off now. See you again on Wednesday. We will be finishing up our planning system, which has a lot of meat that needs to be done. So that's going to be work. It's probably going to